Juniper had spent 4 years clawing her way toward that stage. Every late-night shift, every skipped meal, every time she told herself she could make it without anyone's help, had led to this moment. Her name echoed through the auditorium as she rose in her cap and gown, heart pounding with a mix of pride and disbelief. The dean smiled warmly, diploma in hand, as the audience applauded. Then, just 3 steps from the podium, her world ruptured. From the second row, a woman's voice pierced the celebration. She cheated her way through college. The applause died in an instant, like someone had flipped a switch. Hundreds of heads turned in unison, and phones lifted to capture the scene. Juniper froze. The voice was unmistakable. Sharp, theatrical, rehearsed. It was her mother. "She is a fraud," she shrieked again, standing now. "I raced her, I know. Ask her how she paid for her books. Ask her what she cried to me for in the middle of the night." The dean's hand holding the diploma dropped slowly, eyes flicking between mother and daughter. Juniper's face flushed with disbelief, humiliation anchoring her to the floor. Her roommate Jessica's horrified stare met hers from the third row. One professor lowered her head, another raised a phone. The crowd began to buzz, whispering, shifting. Someone gasped. A baby cried. Security started moving toward the voice, but Juniper could not move. Her legs felt like sandbags, her heart like it had been dropped into ice water. This was not a spontaneous outburst. It was a performance, a precise public ambush timed for maximum damage. Her mother's twisted face, all fury and satisfaction, was unforgettable. She had waited for the one day Juniper could have claimed as her own, and then ripped it apart in front of 500 people. She had not just stolen the spotlight. She had tried to rewrite Juniper's story in real time, to remind her who really held the pen. But she had made one fatal miscalculation. Juniper was no longer the terrified teenager she once exiled, and the world, for the first time, was finally watching. The public ambush at Juniper's graduation had been more than just humiliating. It was the trigger that unearthed years of quiet suffering. Long before the microphones and the shocked audience, before the phones lifted like weapons to record her shame, Juniper had been fighting a battle no one saw. At 18, she had walked away from a home that felt like a trap, refusing to follow her mother's blueprint for life. She had chosen psychology over accounting, her passion over her mother's control, and in return, she was cut off. No phone calls, no help, no love. She packed her life into 2 trash bags and slept on friends' couches, working double shifts and saving every cent of the education fund her grandfather had left her. For years, she budgeted like a soldier, never splurged, never asked for help, believing that hard work would be enough. But months before graduation, something snapped. Her scholarship check bounced. When she visited the financial aid office, she expected a clerical error. Instead, she was told the words that changed everything. "Your account is empty." Stunned, Juniper demanded the transaction history. What she saw felt like a slow-motion betrayal. Withdrawal after withdrawal, thousands of dollars drained, dating back to her sophomore year, funneled into accounts she did not recognize. The $60,000 fund she had guarded like sacred treasure had been quietly stolen, piece by piece, while she worked herself to exhaustion. And worse, it was not random. It was her mother. Juniper would later learn her mother had intercepted her mail, forged documents, and even impersonated her in phone calls. The woman who screamed about fraud on stage was the actual criminal all along. Juniper had to make a choice: stay silent and survive, or speak up and fight back. She chose the fight. She used the last of her savings to hire a private investigator, uncovering a web of deceit that stretched far beyond her imagination. If you believe Juniper made the right choice, comment yes and subscribe to follow her full journey, because the truth she discovered next made the graduation meltdown look like child's play. This was no longer about money. It was about reclaiming her story, exposing a liar, and confronting the very person who taught her how to smile through pain. and Juniper was just getting started. The truth had clawed its way to the surface, and Juniper could no longer pretend that what happened at graduation was a moment of madness. It was the tip of something far more calculated, far more cruel. The theft of her education fund was not just a betrayal, it was a blueprint. Her mother had been eroding her future while pretending to support it, smiling for the world while stealing from her own daughter behind closed doors. Juniper's discovery in the financial aid office, an account drained of over $60,000, was the moment everything tilted. The money was gone, yes, but the lie was worse. Her mother had planned it. She had forged Juniper's signature with surgical precision. She had called the bank, posed as her, rerouted statements, and told them Juniper still lived at home so she could intercept the mail. And that was just the beginning. Determined to uncover the full scope, Juniper hired Frank Morrison, a retired detective who specialized in financial fraud. His office was above a dusty pharmacy, nothing glamorous, but Frank had eyes that missed nothing. Within 2 weeks, he uncovered a paper trail of horror. International transfers to offshore accounts, notarized forms with forged signatures, and phone call logs that placed her mother impersonating Juniper over a dozen times. Even more chilling were the spiral notebooks Frank found, pages and pages of her mother practicing Juniper's signature like a schoolgirl rehearsing for a talent show. It was not impulse, it was obsession. This woman had rehearsed her betrayal. Frank's report included handwriting analysis, voice recordings, bank records, and proof of financial abuse. But it was the audio files that truly broke Juniper. In one call, recorded unknowingly on Juniper's phone, her mother sneered, "Maybe if you had picked a real major, you would not be so broke all the time." That same month, bank statements showed a $3,200 charge to a luxury spa in Miami, paid with Juniper's stolen funds. It was no longer just about deception, it was humiliation wrapped in pretense, abuse masquerading as motherhood. Standing in the middle of Frank's office, Juniper realized her mother had not just stolen her money, she had rewritten her identity. And now, Juniper would reclaim it all. With fire in her chest and receipts in her hands, she was ready to burn the lie to the ground. Juniper's hands trembled as she gripped the manila folder filled with evidence, bank records, forged signatures, call logs. What began as a discovery of theft had now become a full-blown strategy for justice. She had everything she needed to fight back, but she also knew that going after her mother meant blowing open the doors to a past most families would die to keep hidden. Still, she was done hiding. The next morning, she met with Dean Henderson in his office, the walls lined with degrees and framed moments of academic pride. He had witnessed the outburst at graduation, seen the raw cruelty with his own eyes, and now he would hear the truth behind it. As Juniper laid out the evidence, his expression shifted from shock to fury to something more profound. Belief. "What happened to you," he said softly, "should never happen to anyone. I will stand with you." With that, Juniper's private battle became public. She filed a civil lawsuit, charging her mother with identity theft, wire fraud, and embezzlement. She expected resistance, but nothing prepared her for the performance that followed. Her mother, so poised, so manipulative, hired a high-powered attorney and spun a media narrative that painted Juniper as an ungrateful, vindictive daughter. The woman who had once wept about being a selfless mother was now holding press interviews and crying into cameras, accusing Juniper of betrayal. But the deeper the case went, the harder it became to hold the lies together. That was when the rest of the family started talking. Aunt Linda called first, her voice quivering with guilt. She had been silent for 15 years, she confessed, but could no longer stay quiet. Juniper's mother had stolen her inheritance too, $50,000 intended for Juniper and her younger brother Eli. She claimed it was tax protection, but moved the money into private investments and never returned it. Then came Eli himself, the brother who once dismissed Juniper's warnings. When shown the documents, bank transfers, missing education funds, he turned pale. She told me we couldn't afford college, he whispered. She said you blew your fund on clothes and parties. Juniper shook her head. I was working 2 jobs and eating instant noodles, she replied. The story was unraveling fast, each thread exposing more deception. Juniper had not just uncovered a thief, she had exposed a legacy of betrayal woven into the very fabric of her family. And now, the reckoning had truly begun. The courtroom was cold, but Juniper's resolve burned hotter than ever. She sat beside her attorney, Margaret Chen, watching her mother glide into the room, dressed in navy blue and pearls, every inch the perfect portrait of maternal dignity. But beneath the silken lipstick was a woman who had systematically stolen over $130,000 from her daughter and manipulated half the town into believing she was the victim. The walls of the courtroom could not contain the weight of their shared history. This was not just a lawsuit. This was war. Margaret stood first, presenting a mountain of evidence, bank transfers, notarized forms with forged signatures, recordings of coercive phone calls, every piece more damning than the last. The judge, Patricia Reeves, listened carefully, her sharp eyes never leaving Juniper's mother. Then came the expert witness, Dr. Patricia Hammond, a forensic handwriting analyst. She held up enlarged versions of Juniper's signature and compared them to withdrawal forms pulled from the education fund. These were not written by the same person, she said clearly. You can see the hesitation marks here and here. This is deliberate imitation. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Juniper watched her mother's face tighten, then tremble. Dr. Hammond continued, revealing a notebook recovered by the investigator, page after page of Juniper's name written over and over. This demonstrates intent, she said. Not a mistake, a plan. When it was her mother's turn to speak, her voice cracked. I was just trying to protect her, she said, eyes glistening. She was irresponsible. I had to take control. But the judge was unmoved. Did you have legal authority to access her funds after she turned 18? The silence was deafening. Finally, her mother whispered, no. The gavel came down like thunder. Judge Reeves delivered a searing verdict. Full repayment of $130,400, plus punitive damages, plus legal fees. A total of $300,000. The courtroom went still. Juniper's mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing. But there was no victory dance, no glee. Just silence. Juniper stared ahead, steady and composed. She had not come for revenge. She had come for truth. As bailiffs approached with paperwork, the judge added one final blow. Referral for criminal prosecution. Justice had been served, but the emotional toll was just beginning, and the story was not yet over. Justice had been handed down in a courtroom lined with cold marble and quiet gasps, but Juniper knew her real healing would not begin there. The judgment, $300,000 in damages, and the looming possibility of criminal charges was not a triumph, but a severing. Her mother, once the force that dominated every chapter of her life, had been publicly unmasked. The fallout was swift. Her mother resigned from the hospital board. Her once loyal bridge club went silent, and even the grocery store clerks now avoided eye contact. For Juniper, silence was no longer something to fear. It was something to fill, with purpose. The check came in the mail weeks later, the first court-ordered payment. Juniper held it like it might burn her fingers, knowing the money came not from generosity or remorse, but consequence. She deposited it without ceremony, then called Margaret. I want to use it for something real, she said. Something bigger than her lies. That same week, she launched the Rose Fund, a scholarship in honor of her grandmother, one of the only people who had ever believed in her without condition. She bought a modest house on a quiet street, one with peeling paint and a rose garden struggling to bloom. She spent weekends with her sleeves rolled up, painting walls, scrubbing floors, and whispering to the roses like they might understand the girl who had finally come home. On a rainy Saturday, she visited the animal shelter just to walk dogs, but a golden retriever mix named Honey refused to leave her side. She's been here for months, the volunteer said. Nobody wants her because she's not a puppy. Juniper smiled softly. Neither am I. She adopted Honey that day. Together, they built a new rhythm. Morning walks, late-night journaling. The smell of oil paint drifting from the spare bedroom she had turned into a studio. She painted landscapes, quiet hills, starless skies, open roads, places that felt free. Her first scholarship ceremony was held in a local community center, where 5 young women shared stories of rejection and resilience. Juniper stood at the podium, her voice clear. This isn't just about money. It's about the right to keep going when the world tells you to stop. It's about hope, when hope feels out of reach. And in that moment, the woman her mother tried to destroy had never stood taller. The ceremony ended, but Juniper stayed behind, slowly straightening chairs and collecting empty coffee cups, her mind still echoing with the voices of the young women she had just awarded. They had each walked into that room carrying invisible scars, abandonment, betrayal, rejection, and walked out holding not just a scholarship, but a sense of possibility. Watching them reminded Juniper of who she used to be, the girl with shaking hands and a broken heart, begging the world to believe her. But now, that girl had become someone else entirely. She had become the woman who created something lasting from pain. She had built the Rose Fund not as an act of charity, but of defiance, a declaration that her mother's cruelty would never be the final word. Later that night, Juniper walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Honey trotting beside her. Her small house glowed gently at the end of the block, and the roses along the fence bloomed defiantly, even in the cold. Inside, half-finished canvases leaned against the walls, fields of color, bold and unapologetic. Juniper poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world settle into sleep. For once, she did not feel the need to look over her shoulder. But healing is not a straight path. Letters still arrived from her mother, some angry, others pleading, all carefully worded traps in disguise. Juniper no longer opened them. She did not need to. She had already written her own ending, or perhaps her beginning. A life of honesty, of self-trust, of quiet, powerful joy. And yet something still lingered, a question unanswered, a door slightly ajar. Because some wounds never close completely, they just become the place where light gets in. If you believe Juniper's story matters, share it. Comment, "She rose," and follow for the next chapter. There's more to come.